a sinner, left my lover crying on the dance floor. I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner.
Hey guys, welcome back to Slow Damage. No, almost did the wrong thing. Alright, let's do this. Chapter 2. Doctor. End. So now we're moving on to Chapter 3. Thanks to Taku's thorough treatment, I recovered steadily. While I was convalesced, Eiichi called me and apologized for giving me false information about Asakura. He had told me there was proof of Asakura visiting a child brothel, but apparently that was untrue. When Iniji investigated further, he learned that the eyewitness had only seen him loitering outside of the brothel. No one had actually seen him go in. As someone who had always loved children, the unfounded suspicion had made him paranoid. Hayato's behavior toward him was only ever that of a child seeking love from a parental figure. He was love-starved, and perhaps it was that innocent desperation that captivated Asakura in the first place.
子供って無垢な天使のようで無邪気な悪魔になることもあるのよね。本人の意思とは関係なくね。
This was the comment Ray made when he and Taku came to check on me while I was recuperating. Is it working? Taku gave a hard look on his face and fell silent. He was probably thinking of Hayato. After all, Hayato was a victim too. And Taku probably had a lot of feelings on the subject since he cared for the boy. But something didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was bothering me. As I gazed at Taku's wavering smoke, I narrowed my eyes and mulled it over. He felt bad about thinking the guy was like that. Mom? Mom? No. How could I? It's my fault. Fuck. Why? Why did I never meant for this to happen. Huh? Chapter 3. Murasai Takuma. Nostalgia. Two days after Asakura's euphoric episode. The cuts on my back still hurt, but now that I was able to walk again, it was time to start painting. As I was taking stock of my paints, the door opened and Taku walked in wearing a lab coat. The second he laid eyes on me, he frowned and folded his arms.
もう起き上がっても平気なのか。痛みは。
まあ、そこそこ。
At my response, he let out an exaggerated sigh.
本当は平気じゃないんだろ。
Once I had granted my model's wish, I was headed to the canvas, no matter what fresh injuries I was sporting. I wanted to get it out while the image was still fresh in my head. When I was in art mode, there was no stopping me. Taku understood that, which is why he didn't try to force it. He fell silent but didn't leave the room, just stood there with a bitter look on his face. Clearly there was something more he wanted to say. Suspicious, I continued setting up. Finally, he opened his mouth to speak.
俺は朝倉がお前に対してやったことは本当に許せない。許せないんだが、それとは別に朝倉が苦しんでいたことについて理解できないわけでもないんだ。
I froze and looked at him. Where did that come from? He stared at his feet.
朝倉は隼人君を放っておくことができず、結果として入れ込みすぎてしまった。本来医者は患者に対して常に客観的で冷静な距離を保たなきゃならない。朝倉はそれができなかった。だが医者だって人間だ。どれだけ冷静でいようとしても感情に飲み込まれてしまう時もある。魔が差すというのかもしれんが、それがいつどのタイミングで訪れるかなんて誰にもわからない。自分でもな。だから朝倉を全否定することはできないって話だ。
Hesitantly, he rubbed the back of his head. Hand.
いや、すまん。なんでこんなことお前に話してるんだろうな。
Then he turned and left the room. The doctor, overtaken by emotions, to me that described Taku more than anyone else. Was it just Asakura's incident? Maybe he could personally relate to the struggles of a fellow doctor? All the more proof that life was easier when you didn't care about anything. With that thought, I went back to setting up my easel. Oh, another one this early? You will support the Patreon. The world was blurry, like the view from underwater. Vaguely, I could tell that the scarlet light was rippling. Apparently, I was lying down. I tried to get up and discovered that I couldn't move. My limbs were practically frozen solid. I was powerless and deafened by the silence. I was scared. Just then, I sensed someone standing behind me. But I couldn't turn to see. Meanwhile, the presence continued to grow and grow, threatening to engulf me. I tried to scream, but I couldn't even open my mouth. All I could do was tremble as the fear roasted me alive. I could feel laughter rippling through the air near and far. I couldn't tell if the voice was loud or soft. All I could do was tense up my throat and stomach and try to endure it. I was powerless. Three days after I started painting Asakura. After days of barely eating or drinking, I finished my piece and staggered out of my room on December 31st, New Year's Eve. The clinic had been closed for the winter holidays. Nevertheless, Taku was always on the first floor just in case I needed something, and Ray came by almost every day. When I went downstairs, I found Taku and Ray sitting in the waiting room. They rose to their feet and rushed over to me.
とは大丈夫？全然大丈夫そうじゃないけど大丈夫？
Okay, that's doing it again.
背中の傷の具合はどうだ？
They always buried me in an avalanche of questions after I finished a painting.
何か欲しいものはある？
酒とタバコ。
却下。とりあえず簡単に食べられるもの買ってくるわね。
Ray grabbed his coat and wallet and ran out of the building. Unable to bear the intense fatigue, I collapsed onto a nearby bench. Painting always left me feeble, but this time I felt especially awful. Taku crouched down and peered at my face.
大丈夫か？
嫌な夢を見た。
夢？
He furrowed his brow.
俺は手も足も動かすことができなくて、後ろに誰かが立ってて、ひたすら笑ってる夢だ。
誰が撮ってたんだ？
わからない。女の笑い声で何度か同じ内容の夢を見た。
Every time I had a nightmare, I'd wake up with a racing heart, sweating like a marathon runner. Normally, I never remembered my dreams after I woke up, so it was strange that I could have had the same dream over and over. I hated it so much, I couldn't bring myself to sleep on the last night of painting. Taku fell silent as if in contemplation.
薬は飲んでたのか？
絵を描き始めた時はな。その夢を見るのが嫌で途中から飲まなくなった。
そうか。調べてみた方がいいかもしれんな。薬の処方も変えよう。
Just then, the front door opened wide.
ただいま買ってきたわよ。
Ray ran in carrying a big bag of grocery in hand. He set the bags on the reception counter, then turned back to us, frowning.
あらやだ。トワが今にも死にそうな顔してるのはともかく、タクも相当ひどい顔してるわね。クマがすごいわ。
He tapped his lower eyelids with his fingers.
そうか？
Smiling wearily, Taku ran a hand over his cheek and jaw.
そういえば何か試験でも受けるの？
試験？
He looked back at Ray, puzzled.
だってタク最近やけに真面目に勉強してるじゃない？昼休みとかクリニックを閉めた後も一人で黙々と机に向かってるし、だから新しい資格を取るために試験勉強してるのかなって。
ああ、まあそうだな。試験か。
Taku hesitated awkwardly. Ray stared at him wide-eyed.
違うの？じゃあ何の勉強？そもそも勉強じゃないとか。
いや、自主的にやってるだけだ。
Studying? Oh, we got our new monster.
そうなんだ。あんまり頑張りすぎないでね。若くないんだから。
Get off my ass.
おい、一言余計だぞ。
Taku donned a melodramatic scowl with Ray laughed and shrugged.
そうだ。とは、とりあえずこれ食べて。
Ray grabbed the bags off the reception counter and thrust them at me. They were filled with ready-made snacks like sandwiches and rice balls.
これからお鍋と年越しそばの準備よ。おせちは家で仕込んだやつがあるから年明けに持ってくるわね。
鍋？
そばだけじゃ物足りないじゃない。せっかくだからあったかいお鍋も作ろうと思って。
レイは途中でいなくなるけどな。
そう、私は店の子たちとカウントダウンパーティーがあるから途中で抜けるわ。あとは2人でごゆっくりってやつよ。
だったらそれができた時に食べるから。
あのね、カップラーメンじゃあるまいし今すぐ出てくるわけじゃないのよ。あんた今髪みたいに白い顔色してるんだから一刻も早く栄養をとってちょうだい。
Ray put one hand on his hip and pointed squarely in my face with the other.
とわもたくも正月はおとなしく休んでなさい。
After nagging me like a mother, his eyes widened in realization.
あ、そ そうだ。トマの絵見てこなきゃ。描き終わったのよね。
あ
やだ、すっごく楽しみ。写真撮ってブログに投稿してもいい？
He was referring to the Roost blog, The Fourth Face. I nodded and he strolled off to the elevator.
今回はどんな感じなのかしら。
I figured I'd go back to my apartment with him, so I rose to my feet, but then my vision pitched sideways. And gone.
とは
Taku reached out and caught me before I hit the floor. Apparently, my body was even weaker than I realized.
レイが言ってたことは間違ってないな。とりあえず何か食べた方がいい。
He sighed in exasperation. As I returned to the bench, I looked around the grocery bag sitting nearby. I didn't feel hungry, but my body needed energy.
正月は俺もこっちに泊まるからのんびりしよう。
Taku lived in a condo separate from the clinic, but he slept here every now and then. Since I never used the bed in my apartment, he would crash there occasionally. Evidently, he was planning to stay through the holidays this time. I nodded, then reached into the bag and grabbed a sandwich at random. In a blink, Ray tidied up the mess I'd created while I was painting. Then midnight rolled around and we sat around the hot pot he made for us. The pale soy milk broth filled the room with warmth as it bubbled. Taku cracked the tab on his third beer and raised it in my direction, his cheeks faintly flushed.
明けましておめでとう。
おめでとう。
今年もよろしく。
Likewise, I raised my whiskey bottle, then brought it to my lips. He set his can on the coffee table, leaned forward, and stirred the contents of the pot.
もうだいぶ食べたな。にしても豆乳鍋なんて洒落てるよな。レイらしいっちゃらしいが、俺ならただの水炊きになってるな。
He scooped up some vegetables and put them in his own bowl, then looked at me.
お前にしちゃ結構食べた方なんじゃないか。
まあ
Still only 1/5 of the amount he ate.
鍋は食べやすくていいよな。お前好き嫌いはあったか？
特別嫌いなものはないな。
で、特別好きなものもないと。
ああ
He rolled his eyes at me and laughed.
絵を描き終わった後で体が弱ってるだろうから、食べやすい鍋は正解だったな。
Taku grabbed a big bite of veggies with his chopsticks and stuffed it in his mouth. Taku didn't approve of euphoria, but he didn't outright try to stop me, nor did he nag me endlessly. I enjoyed our current relationship.
とっと
Right as he reached out to the can on the table, he missed and knocked it over. Reflectively, I reached out to try to catch it. My hand bumped into his. Instantly, Taku froze, startled. He managed to catch the can, but a bit of its contents splashed out onto the table.
悪い、こぼれちまったな。ティッシュ取ってくれるか。
I pulled out a few tissues from the box and handed them over. With a guilty smile, he wiped up his spill. Was Taku's face flushed because of the alcohol? I'd rarely ever seen him in this state.
酔っ払ってる？
ん？
顔が赤い。
そりゃあ、まあな。
Taku fell still for a moment, then donned a stiff smile for some reason. After he wiped up the spilled beer, he downed the rest of the can and exhaled loudly.
少し寝てから初詣に行くか。体調はどうだ？動けそうか？
ああ
I normally had no interest in food, but apparently my body needed nutrients regardless. After eating, I was feeling a lot less exhausted.
じゃ、レイにも連絡しとこう。行くなら合流したいって言ってたからな。
He tapped around his phone, then switched off the portable burner.
鍋は起きたら片付けるから置いとくぞ。
ああ
He gathered all the trash in a to-go bag and got up to toss it in the trash can. Afterwards, he walked straight to the bed.
それじゃおやすみ。
He flopped down on the bed and almost immediately started snoring. I was tempted to get some shut-eye myself, but I couldn't will myself to feel sleepy, and if I took sleeping pills, I wouldn't be waking up until noon at the earliest. In the end, I decided to lay awake until morning. After Taku woke up around 7, the two of us got dressed. Then we piled into his car and drove to the shrine. We were going to meet up with Ray at some point, but then he sent us a message in the group chat claiming he was too hungover from the countdown party last night. Since it was New Year's Day, unsurprisingly, the streets were packed. The one shrine in Shinkumi was already a popular spot for residents and tourists alike, so we had to wait over an hour to get into the parking lot. After we finally parked, we got out and walked to the shrine on foot. Food stands were packed in tightly, as were the crowds. We felt like cattle slowly trudging forward. Another hour later, we arrived at the temple, goaded on by the visitors behind us. I put a donation in the offering box and pressed my hands together.
神社は二礼二泊一礼だぞ。
Taku criticized me from the sidelines after he finished his turn, but I just shrugged it off.
大事なのは形式じゃなくて気持ちだろ。
気持ちを込めたって？お前が？
俺なりに。
Smirking, he fixed me with a playfully skeptical look.
神様なんて信じてないだろう、お前。
俺が信じようと信じまいと、いるもんはいるんじゃないのか。
He sighed in exasperation, then laughed. At the gift shop, we bought a talisman, then decided to check out the stands on our way out. According to Taku, he always chose a food stand based on its vibe. Supposedly, this was the secret to festival food, since it added extra flavor. Since the main pathway was clogged with crowds, we took a side path. This path was narrower with fewer stands, but at least there was room to breathe. As we walked along, I spotted a familiar trio near the main path. It was Kataru, Mayu, and Iji. Mayu was gazing out at the crowd looking bored, that is until he spotted me.
あ、トワだ。
お？
トワさん、
They all called out to me as they walked over.
新年明けましたね。組長のことがあるので挨拶のみになりますが。今年もよろしくね。
いろいろと世話になるぜ。
Kataru smirked, then put an arm around my shoulders, gave me a pat, and let me go.
村瀬先生、今年もよろしくです。
ああ、よろしく。
Taku reacted belatedly with a polite smile.
3人揃って初詣か。
ええ、どうしようか迷ったんですけど、一応来るだけ来ようって思って。小太郎は毎年来るの嫌がるんだけどね。エイジがどうしてもって言うから。
なんで混んでるところにわざわざ行かなきゃいけねえんだよ。それに寒いし。
寒いのは間違いないね。
Put on a shirt.
着込んでくればいいじゃないですか。
Thank you.
やだよ。めんどくせえだろ。
わざわざそこまでしないよ。
Both of them shrugged off Iji's suggestion.
まあいいですけど、初詣っていろんな人が一斉に集まるので情報もたくさん拾えますし、やっぱり来ておかないとって思うんですよ。ね、トワさんもそう思いません？
ああ、まあ。
I answered as unenthusiastically. Kataru burst out laughing.
だよな。トアはそうだよな。エイジ、お前トアに同意求めること自体が間違ってんだよ。
分かってますよ。でもこの中でかろうじて同意を求められるのってトワさんだけじゃないですか。ま、そりゃそうね。
Mayu laughed so hard he nearly spit out his lollipop.
それじゃ俺たちは行きます。トワさん、村瀬先生、また。
またな、とは。
ほじゃ。
The trio walked past me towards the main shrine area. Taku looked at me with a weary grin.
あっちの店で甘酒を売ってるんだが、寄ってもいいか？
ああ、
Together, the two of us walked to a stand with a sign that read Amazaki. Next to it was a dining area with tables and chairs, but it was already packed.
お前の分はいるか？
いい。
わかった。買ってくるからここで待っててくれ。
I moved to the edge of the table area and watched as Taku got in line for Amazaki. A few moments later, he waved his way back through the crowd carrying a paper cup.
寒いし混んでるし、さすが正月だな。
The words left his lips in a white fog as he took a sip of his drink.
あっち。うまい。あったまるな。甘いもんは苦手だが、甘酒だけはいけるんだ。
Give,
お前も、ほら、
give.
いや、
Damn.
正月くらい、海苔を合わせてくれよ。
Grinning, he offered me the cup. I wasn't completely opposed to Amazaki, so I accepted it, then took a small sip. The hot, sweet, vicious liquid entered my mouth.
どうだ？
It's viscous. I like vicious better.
ダメだったか？
いや、ただ酒の味がするのにアルコールじゃないのが理解できない。
This was my honest opinion, but Taku burst out laughing.
当たり前だろ。何言ってんだお前は。
Chuckling, Taku took the cup back and took another sip.
よし、それじゃ行くか。
And so we set off into the flow of the crowd. As we walked down the path, I saw a cluster of people gathered in an open area up ahead. In the center stood Sakaki, chatting amiably and accompanied by Igarashi.
おい、あれって
榊だな。
親しみやすさをアピールってところか。
Taku muttered quietly to himself as he watched Sakaki chat with people around him. Over the past few years, the Takasato Gumi had worked to improve their reputation with the residents and tourists of the greater Abaro neighborhood. Their efforts included holding a variety of sponsored events, including an accessibility-focused shopping mall, cleaning up the residential streets, and more. Maybe this had an effect on the upper class and tourists, but for the people struggling with poverty every day, nothing changed. Still, Sakaki was probably eager to start taking charge as the next leader of the gang.
あ、トアじゃねえか。
When he spotted me, Sakaki raised a hand in greeting. Then he and Igarashi walked over.
村瀬先生もちーと新年を祝うことはできねえんだが、今年もよろしく。
よろしくお願いします。
Igarashi frequented our clinic as a patient, so Taku and I knew him well.
こちらこそよろしくお願いします。
いやー、本当は来るのをやめようか迷ったんだがな。親父のことがあるからよ。ただまあ、様子を見るだけなら問題ねえかと思ってな。
小太郎たちも似たようなこと言ってた。
ああ、そうか。みんな考えることは同じなんだな。
Sakaki swiftly reached into his jacket pocket. Then he pulled out a thick leather wallet, licked his thumb, and stretched a leafling through the bills.
だったけ、これはトアの分だ。
He proceeded to hand me 50,000 yen like it was nothing.
いや、
いいから、ほら。
I had no interest in accepting his money, so I kept both hands in my pockets. Then he pushed the bills against my chest. Reluctantly, I accepted.
こっちは先生の分。 あとはおまけで五十嵐お前もだついてるな。
He offered wads of cash to Taku and Igarashi, too.
おお、マジっすか？いいっすか？やったー！さすが親父太っ腹！
Igarashi was every bit as shallow as he looked, so naturally he was over the moon. Taku, however, hesitantly shook his head.
さすがに受け取れません。
まあそう言わないでくださいよ先生。今日は一年がこれから始まるという日だ。今日限りだと思って受け取ってください。
I'll take 50,000 yen.
それにこいつはトアの世話をしてくれてる例の意味もあるんだね。
My desk got stuck.
主治医なので世話をしているという感覚ではないのですが、お言葉に甘えさせていただきます。
Taku wasn't the type who could say no to something like that. He accepted the money even more reluctantly than I had.
そこに出てる餅は食ったがなかなかうまかったぞ。
Oh, she is yummy.
ああ、俺買ってきます。
Without waiting for me or Taku to respond, Igarashi ran off like a lapdog he was. Sakaki watched him go with a smile.
あいつ頭があんまり良くねえが心根はまっすぐだからな。
Should
ど
want to, eh?
うにもほっとけねえんだ。
犬に似てる。
そうなんだよ。バカで容量悪くてよく失敗するんだがよ。尻尾を振ってまたあり疲れると邪険にできなくてな。ついつい餌やっちまう。
He nodded to himself like a wise old grandfather, then someone's phone started ringing.
あ、俺だな。ちょっと失礼。
He pulled out his cell phone from his pocket and put it to his ear.
どうした？あ？どっからだ？そうだ。
I watched in real time as his face slowly grew harder and darker.
わかった。そっちは任せる。
Once the call was over, he looked back at us still menacingly.
急に戻りの用ができちまった。正月早々ついてねえわ。餅は五十嵐からもらってくれ。
And with that, he strode away.
困ったもんだ。
Taku let out a sigh, then he handed me the money Sakaki had given him.
酒でも買え。
いや、
Before I could finish, he stuffed the money into my coat pocket. When I tried to give it back, I realized Taku was frozen in place, looking at something up ahead. A man in a suit was walking towards us. It was Tono. He was accompanied by another man I didn't recognize, but his calm, dignified air suggested he wasn't a Takasato goon. Then Tono noticed us and made a beeline straight for us. I was still holding the money from Taku, so for a time being I kept it back in my pocket.
これは村瀬先生とトアじゃないか。
He smiled, speaking in a courteous tone. Taku looked back at him in silence. His smoke hadn't changed, but I could feel a hint of tension in the air.
親父のことは残念だが、新しい年を迎えたわけだし、お互いにそろそろ本気を出していかないとな。いろいろと。
He regarded me with a meaningful look.
トア、お前村瀬先生にずっと厄介になるつもりなのか？なんならこっちで腕の良い医者を紹介してやるぞ。
いい。
別に村瀬先生にこだわる必要もないんだろ。
Excuse me?
タクでいい。
迷惑をかけるだけのわがままになってるんじゃないのか？
Taku looked at me in surprise, then turned back to Tono.
迷惑だと思ったことはないから今のままで構わん。
At this, Tono exhaled like he was done caring.
そうか。ならいいんだ。それじゃまた。
With a brusque farewell, he set off, and the other man followed close behind him.
こういう大々的な行事の時はどこに行っても高里組が総出でうろうろしてるな。
Taku looked at me as he murmured quietly.
前にも言ったが高里組とはあまり付き合うなよ。
He loved to nag me about this, probably because he didn't have a high opinion of the Takasato Gumi, and he especially didn't get along with Tono. Taku downed his now cold amazake and then walked to the nearest trash can and threw away the cup.
すみません、お待たせしました。
Oh, the puppy's back. Just then, a flurry of loud footsteps heralded the return of Igarashi, carrying chopsticks and a plastic takeout tray of mochi in each hand.
安倍川と磯辺と醤油、とりあえず全部買ってきました。ってあれ、榊さんは？
Oh, that looks good.
帰ったぞ。
マジっすか？
With a yelp, he thrust the chopsticks and mochi containers at us.
ああ、これどうぞ。じゃあまた。榊さん！
Then he ran off into the crowd. With a chuckle, Taku watched him go, then looked like the tension eased.
なんていうか本当に犬みたいだな。
俺が知り合った頃からずっとあんな感じだ。
ほっとけないってのもわかる気がするな。ま、ほっとけないのはお前も同じだが。
犬と一緒か？
Yes.
性格と見た目が違うだけで大きくくくればそうかもな。
He looked down at the mochi containers and smiled.
この餅せっかくだからあったかいうちに食べようぜ。人が少ないところへ行こう。ちなみにお前この中じゃどの餅が好きなんだ？
どれでも。
Taku slumped his shoulders in exasperation.
じゃあ俺は磯辺と醤油を食べるからお前は安倍川担当な。この安倍川結構砂糖が多そうだからな。
全部は無理。
分かってるよ。
We stepped off the path in search of somewhere quieter. After we ate our mochi, we decided it was time to head back to the clinic, so we made our way to the parking lot where we left our car. As we walked through the crowd path, Taku spotted something in the distance and frowned. I followed his gaze and spotted a little boy yelling excitedly to his parents. Maybe Taku was thinking about Hayato? The little boy was about Hayato's age after all. Maybe it reminded him of what happened with Asakura, but I had no intention of bringing it up again, so I shifted my gaze back to the crowd. Beyond the countless people praying to find happiness the year ahead, I could see a tall tower looming in the distance. But this was no ordinary radio tower. No, it was a surveillance tower used by the Takasato Gumi to ensure none of their debtors tried to flee Shinkumi. The surveillance towers tracked the movements of the web tags forcibly implanted in them, and any who tried to escape were either arrested or killed. No matter how happy the shrine visitors may have looked on the outside, any number of them could be in debt. Just then I realized Taku was gone. We must have gotten separated while I was distracted by the surveillance towers. But before I could start walking, someone grabbed my arm from behind.
と
I turned to find Taku standing there looking frightened.
気をつけろよ。はぐれたら危ない。
Sorry, Dad. This made me laugh.
どうした？
俺のこといくつだと思ってるんだよ。
いくつになってもお前はフラフラしてるからな。
だったらなおさらはぐれたところでいつもと変わらないだろ。
お前の場合ちょっと目を離した隙に道端で倒れてたとしても不思議じゃない。
His expression was dead serious, so I decided to give in. Times like these, Taku was always stubbornly overprotective of me. Side by side, once more, we headed off to the parking lot.
ああ、 そういやな。今年から診療時間を変えようと思ってるんだ。
何時？
開始時間は変わらん。終了時間を午前1時から0時に変えようと思ってる。
1時間か。大して変わった感じがしないな。
そうでもないぞ。それに俺も不在にすることが増えるかもしれん。最悪臨時休業になる。
なんで？
忙しいんだよ。
新しい勉強？
At this, Taku averted his gaze and nodded.
うん。
His response was vague at best, but I didn't intend to keep digging. So instead, I walked on in silence. What's Taku hiding? Come on. Oh, I didn't get to read the rumors. Darn it. Pressed the button too quick. 5 days later. We'll find out next time. So thank you guys, as always, for joining me for this series and others, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to check out the other series on the channel and my second channel, Sinfully Pure. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Bye, everybody.